Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with.
Zach Moreth.
Today, we're here to talk a little bit about the Ole Miss LSU matchup this weekend in Baton Rouge. Ole Miss opened up that game as a 3.5 point favorite. I believe that's where it sits at right now as well. 61 point over under on that game. We know last year was a pretty high scoring matchup. Previous matchups in the past when these teams have been pretty high scoring as well. So probably expecting another one here today in that one. Injury report just came out for this game. For the updated injury report, we had an injury report yesterday for the first time this week, and then the updated one today, just moments ago before we started this podcast. We'll jump right into that, talk a little bit about that, and we'll get to previewing the matchup to our keys to the game. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the keys to this injury report, Zach. Just your thoughts on the only doubtful one on here is Matt Jones.
Yeah, Cam, again, we're diving right into it, what the people want to hear. I think Ulysses Bentley is going to play. Lane Kiffin was asked about this at Reb Talk at Boo-Ray with David Kellum, and Lane, he basically said another running back is going to get carries that isn't Henry Parrish. And if you're looking at the only other running back who's played essentially in those dead minutes of the early games, it was Ulysses Bentley. Now, should he have been playing in those minutes? No, I think Bentley should have been started all year long. No one knows what's happening, but it seems like his opportunity is finally going to come in Saturday night. And I hope he breaks out because seriously, we've seen it. Bentley he's an all caliber SEC player. He was great with Judkins last year. He brings a real sense of speed. He cuts back, really just almost like an NFL running back. So I'm excited to potentially see Bentley out there. And again, if it's not Bentley, I'm very curious to see who else runs behind Parrish, who's also going to be a little banged up. We said he might not play this week, but after looking at the injury report, Parrish is clear. He's good to go. And that's a great sign for the Ole Miss running game. But, what else stands out to you, Cam?
I guess what really stands out to me last week, Princely Yellen did not play against South Carolina. Could possibly be returning this week, questionable. I would like to see him out there. I think it would be a big time move for Ole Miss to put him out there if he's able to go, just because the caliber of this LSU offensive line. We both know, we've talked about it all week. This is the LSU offensive line. It's got 2 first-round tackles, a top 5 pick at left tackle in Will Campbell, and then Emory Jones Jr. over at right tackle, who's a potential first-round pick as well. And if you put Princely on one of those guys, likely on Campbell for the whole game, it gives you the opportunity to send other guys and not have to worry about Campbell getting multiple guys. We've seen guys of Campbell's caliber, and I've seen videos of Campbell in the past blocking multiple guys on the field. And you don't want someone that's just going to absorb the entire defensive line. And I feel like if you have Princely out there for Ole Miss, it just gives the other guys a chance to go after the quarterback and an Ole Miss team that leads the country in sacks. And I mean, despite how good Suntarine Perkins played a week ago, we all know Perkins is a smaller guy. Princely, a little bit bigger of a guy going up against a top 5 pick and Will Campbell. So if you see Princely out there this weekend, I think it's a big deal for Ole Miss.
100%, Cam. Spot on. Again, I think Princely kind of needs to play in order for this pass rush to really, excel and succeed against an LSU offensive line that doesn't give up a lot of sacks. They're going to need to find pressure on Nussmeier, and through that, you need guys coming off the edge like Princely. One of the other things I wanted to dive into was Trey Harris, obviously. Huge headline going into this week. I personally think he'll play after watching him jog and bike on the sideline and walk into the locker room. There was really no sort of limping or anything like that. He's listed as questionable. Rumors have been saying that he has been practicing lightly this week. So, again, I think he plays. It's his homecoming going back to Louisiana. Again, something's wrong if he doesn't play. That's my take.
Absolutely. Like you said, I've talked about it with you this past week as well. Trey Harris is a Louisiana guy. We talked about, he made a post early in the season, and it was a picture of Tiger Stadium, I believe, with the date of the game on it. So this is a guy who was ready for this game when the season started. This is a guy who showed up in this game a year ago and won the game ultimately on the game-winning touchdown, making a move when it really wasn't supposed to be a touchdown. You make a guy miss and get in the end zone. This is a guy who's going to show up to play this game. He's probably going to have a lot of family members there. And I'm expecting him to see him out there, even if it's to a lower degree than what we've seen him this year, a guy that catches the ball 10-plus times a game. Moving into some of these other guys, Lewis Moore still on the injury report. Haven't really seen him, I believe, since maybe the Georgia Southern or Wake Forest game. It'd be good to see Lewis Moore back out there. I know Jason Kennedy, Yam Banks have kind of been in that nickel spot role in his place. Yam Banks had a pretty solid game last week. I believe he made. I'm not sure if it was a PFF team. It was one of the
Yeah.
all week teams last week in that role that he had. Didn't play a ton of snaps in that game, but in the snaps that he played, he was very effective, especially in pass coverage. It seemed like. And yeah, Banks, I feel like is one of those guys where if it comes to it with this LSU receiver room, he can go out there and make a tackle one-on-one like Trey Amos does from time to time.
Yeah.
Also, J.J. Pegues was on that injury report list yesterday. J.J. and we talked about it before, J.J. and Micah Pettis. It seems like those two guys are on the injury report pretty often. Those guys probably get banged up a lot throughout the weeks of football, especially a guy like Pegues who's playing both sides of the ball and just always got his nose in there. So these guys are probably going to be on the injury report for most of the year. But these are guys that I'm assuming are going to play every week as long as there's no significant injury there. So expecting J.J. Pegues to play there too. Two other guys, Chris Graves, Reese McIntyre. Reese McIntyre went down late in the game last week. Caleb Warren stepped in for him. Didn't really miss a beat there on the offensive line with Caleb Warren in, but if you have two centers who can rotate in and out, keep each other fresh, and they're both doing just as well as each other, I don't see the problem there. And having Chris Graves back at corner, if he can get out there, would be top of the notch for Ole Miss. This is a really good really good pass offense for LSU. These corners are going to be tired trying to cover guys all game. If you can get a guy like Turnage a break, get a guy like Amos a break with Chris Graves back in the lineup, who was a starter at one point for this Ole Miss team. So if he comes back, it's big.
Huge, Cam. And then moving into LSU, yesterday, again, they had a player, West Weeks, who I believe is their leading tackler. He's a linebacker, fantastic player. He's listed as doubtful. And today he's listed as questionable. Again, it seems like Kelly's playing similar games as Kiffin. I fully expect Weeks to play. And he's an incredible player, so that's another guy Ole Miss has to prepare for. But other than that, really nothing crazy, nothing sticking out to my eyes, Cam. It looks like for the majority, both teams are going to be pretty healthy. Obviously, Harold Perkins had that season-ending injury, but we can't change that. So this week, I mean, both teams look pretty healthy, and I think it's going to be a really good matchup on Saturday night.
Absolutely. It seemed like LSU didn't really have too much on their injury list. Only other guy that really stuck out to me was C.J. Daniels, their wide receiver 3, listed as questionable. He was one of I believe the 4 guys on LSU's receiver room that have 20-plus catches. And somebody likes to share that ball around a lot. Even Kyron Lacey doesn't have a ton of receptions. I believe he's the second leading receiver on that team right now, on Aaron Anderson. So not having C.J. Daniels at wide receiver 3 could be something to look at for LSU in that game as well. Moving into the previews, just kind of keys to the game here for me and Zach for LSU Ole Miss. If you want to start, Zach.
Yeah, first thing, Cam, the Ole Miss defensive line versus the LSU offensive line. It's going to be crucial for guys like Walter Nolan and J.J. Pegues to apply interior pressure. That's by far the weakest spot of the LSU offensive line. You know, we mentioned it. They have 2 first-round pick offensive tackles. So Walter Nolan, Pegues, Akilo Stone. If Ivy works in the middle a little bit, Pooh Pollard, TJ Dottery are blitzing through, the A or B gaps. You have to apply pressure to Nussmeier. And on the edges, you have to be able to keep some containment too. You can't allow Nussmeier to scramble and extend these plays with a wide receiving core that's pretty solid for the most part. My key number 2 is, can Ole Miss establish the ground game? Even if Trey Harris is playing, I don't know how close he's going to be to 100%. I don't know how much you can use him as if he was 100%. So it's important, and regardless, you're playing on the road. So it's crucial that you get the run game going. The run game isn't as amusing to watch. It takes the crowd noise out of it a little bit. And if you can really start to establish 4 or 5 yards per play, then you open up your playbook into play action and all the tricks, the option plays that Lane Kiffin likes to run. The last thing I got, Cam, you have to score touchdowns in the red zone. It's something that Ole Miss surprisingly has seemed to struggle with this year. It seems like we've seen a few too many field goals in comparisons to years before. And in a game in Death Valley, a game where seemingly everything is on the line, you have to put up 6 on the board, especially when you get those drives and you're first and goal. You have to score. Put Pegues in there, pound the ball, and let's get some points. But all in all, I got Ole Miss winning this one 30-24. Again, I don't think it'll feel like a close game. I think at some points LSU will make it close, but I think Ole Miss wins comfortably in terms of the pace of the game. But yeah, the final score, I have Ole Miss 30-24.
Absolutely. I'd like to start off agreeing with you there on the offensive line for this Ole Miss team and for this LSU team. You're gonna have to get after these guys. You're gonna have to get after Nussmeier, exploit those weak spots. I talked about it a little bit with you off camera. It seems like the center in the middle of the offensive line for LSU is the weak spot. Not saying that there's really a weak spot in this LSU offensive line that's only allowed 2 sacks all year. None of them coming from anybody on the offensive line. I believe both the sacks allowed were just missed blocks by the running backs, missed pickup blitzes. This is an LSU offensive line that just doesn't allow you to get to the quarterback. I believe both those sacks that have been allowed on Nussmeier were allowed in the South Carolina game. So similar to Ole Miss, this is a team that gets after the quarterback. South Carolina got after Nussmeier. If Ole Miss can get after Nussmeier, get 3+ sacks in that game, maybe I think they like their chances. Obviously, if you get Umami yelling back, it's big as well.
Yeah.
Another thing, really just the biggest thing to me, it's going to be a lot different. You go into Columbia last week, you said it's loud. I believe Diego Pound said in his interview earlier this week it was loud. It was very loud going into Columbia last week. It's going to be even louder going into Baton Rouge this week. I told you before the show, Zach, that I needed to read a little stat that I saw. Saturday Down South just posted this article just a few minutes ago before we started this podcast. Since 2000, 123 night games have been played in Tiger Stadium. LSU owns a record of 115-8 in those games. So that just tells you how hard it is to play in Death Valley, how hard it is to go in there at nighttime when the fans really show up. I know we've seen pictures this year where LSU fans weren't showing up for day games. That's a day game. It's hot in Baton Rouge. The fans aren't going to show up for games that, especially when they know they're going to win those types of games. These LSU fans are going to show up. You best believe it, and they're going to be loud. It's going to be a crazy environment in Baton Rouge, and I think Ole Miss is going to have to find ways to handle it. And I think last week they handled it to perfection. If you handle it the same way you did last week to a higher degree, I believe you had success in this game. Another big thing. Go ahead, Zach.
No, all you, brother. Keep going.
Another big thing I looked at on this roster, I said it a little while ago, Aaron Anderson is the top receiver on this team. A lot smaller of a guy than you see in a number one receiver in the SEC, though. I mean, I know Ole Miss had small receivers in the past, like Elijah Moore, who was the number one receiver. Aaron Anderson, as we know, respect to him, he leads his team in receiving right now. We know who the number one receiver is on this team. It's Kyron Lacey. We saw what he's able to do in the past against Ole Miss. We saw what he's able to do in the past against other teams. And if you can somewhat limit Kyron Lacey, you still have to worry about Aaron Anderson. So whoever's on Aaron Anderson this game, I believe, has to be at the top of their game. It can't be taking a break because you're not guarding Kyron Lacey. You still have to respect the speed of Aaron Anderson, know that he can get by you even though he's a smaller guy. Said this also, there's 4 receivers with 20-plus catches on this LSU team. 3 of them are receivers, one being the tight end Mason Taylor, who's been there for a while, gritty player for that LSU team. And kind of going to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, sticking to the defensive side of the ball here. This is an LSU team that has the second worst rushing attack in the SEC. If they can't really run the ball against an Ole Miss defensive line that is the top run defense in the SEC, one of the top run defenses in the country, this is going to be a rough day for the LSU offense. I believe if Ole Miss can kind of just limit that rush game. I believe last week South Carolina didn't rush for over 100 yards until later in the game when Ole Miss was kind of just trying to run the clock out. Get to the finish line there when Ole Miss kind of let up those yards. But it seems like this is the Ole Miss defense that's going to stop the rushing attack for LSU. But then you still have to worry about the passing attack. Another thing, get the ball to Prieskorn. I've been saying it every week. You got to get the ball to Caden Prieskorn. We've seen it last week. I believe it was on a free play where Dart found Prieskorn over the middle. Just give him a chance. And it wasn't the greatest throw by Dart, but Prieskorn went up and got it, came down with it, got the first down, got more than the 5 yards you were going to get from the penalty. And you got the ball to Caden Prieskorn. This is a guy that only has, I think, about 12 catches on the year. If you can get the ball to him more and take some pressure off some of those receivers like Antoine Wells, like Trey Harris, like Jordan Watkins, and you can get the ball over the middle of the field into the flats to Prieskorn, it does a lot for you. Just getting the ball going downfield, especially in the run game, too, kind of opens up the run game, gets those linebackers out in the flats away from the middle of the field and opens up that run game for a guy like Parrish who doesn't really bang a lot with defensive linemen as much as we've seen running backs at Ole Miss do in the past. And then lastly, just finish like it did last week. It seemed like in the second half that even though the Ole Miss offense kind of was sluggish in the second half last week, it seemed like that Ole Miss defense was locked in coming out of the halftime locker room, knew exactly what they had to do to finish the game off, and they did it. And if you can do that this week, and we saw last time Ole Miss went into Death Valley, they had a big lead in the first quarter. I believe 17-3 at the end of the first quarter. If you can get a lead like that, you got to finish. And if you're up a big at halftime, you have to keep building on that lead.
Absolutely, Cam. Again, awesome points. And I do want to add on to one of those things. Unlike any week so far this year, you're playing against not only a receiver in Kyron Lacy, but again, the duo with the tight end Mason Taylor, a guy who didn't play well last year, but was incredible the year before. And again, he's shown that he can be a key factor in the receiving game, a guy who can really get open in the middle of the field and in the red zone. So it's something you have to take into account because you're going to want to blitz to try and get as much pressure on Nussmeier. But again, the second they read a blitz, it's going to Taylor, a very capable tight end. And then moving on to our side with our tight end, Caden Prieskorn, yeah, man, you got to get him the ball, period. Not only does it open up the run game, like Cam said, but the pass game, because then it's another guy to worry about. It seems like South Carolina really was never too worried about Prieskorn when you got him lining up in the X and Y spots rather than on the line of scrimmage going to get a ball, in the middle of the field. And that's what we have to get back to. We saw it a lot against Penn State, one of the best defenses in the country last year. We saw it against LSU last year, Hopefully we can get it back into that rhythm, see Caden Prieskorn getting some catches, and let this offense really live up to its potential. Because once the ball gets going to Prieskorn, Watkins, Wells, all these guys start to get open, and we can really start to move the ball down the field at an efficient level, which, to be honest, we struggled with points. I also do want to talk about I don't know. I'm a little bothered by the fact that our game's being played at the same time as the Oregon-Ohio State game, Cam. I'm going to have to, me and my roommates are already talking about a 2 TV setup, but
Got to.
I don't want to do that. I want to focus on one game, man. And I get it. Like, TV providers are fighting for views. YouTube TV is trying to get eyes on advertisements, commercials, whatever. I want to be able to focus on these games one game at a time. And I'm not going to be able to do that, Cam. But, it's all right. I'll be primarily locked into the Ole Miss game. But again, this is a second and third best team in the country playing at the same damn time, dude.
Absolutely. It's a crazy week in college football. So many matchups across the board. Another crazy week in college football next week. Ole Miss will be on a bye. So,
Yeah.
Good week to sit down and not have to worry about the anxiety of watching your team play for Ole Miss fans next week. But really just going back a little bit, I wanted to add one more thing to that LSU preview. This is also the worst pass defense in the SEC. Bottom of the SEC, allowing not a crazy amount of passing yards a game, 236 yards a game, but this is an LSU team that's only played not saying that UCLA is not the greatest of competition, but this is an LSU team that's only played USC to as far as a passing attack. We know South Carolina didn't really have much of a passing attack. They have a solid quarterback in Norris Sellers who can run the football, but it seems like USC is the only passing attack this LSU team's faced. So if Dart can exploit these DBs for LSU and do what they haven't been and do to them what other teams have been able to do to them at a higher level that we know he's capable of, I believe it's going to be a good sign for Jackson Dart on Saturday. I wanted to add my prediction too. I got Ole Miss 34, LSU 28. My hot take prediction of the game will be Ole Miss defensive line gets to Nussmeier 3 times.
I love it, Cam. Let's go. I'm not a betting guy, but I got Jackson Dart thrown over 290 yards. I think Dart gets back this week. Again, no disrespect to LSU, but on paper, they have the worst passing defense in the SEC. So it's an opportunity for Jackson to spread the ball around. We talked about getting the ball to Prieskorn, and then the offense opens up, maybe throwing the ball to Bentley a little bit right in the passing game, get the running backs involved, right? But there's going to be opportunities for Jackson to really, get himself back into how he usually plays, which I feel like he hasn't done the past 2 weeks. I also have, obviously, Ole Miss minus 3.5 with my score prediction of 30-24. It's going to be crazy. Unfortunately, I will not be there. Cam will be there, but I'll be tweeting. I'll be interacting with the fans and just watching, man. I'm looking forward to Saturday. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. I think that's all we got for you guys. Make sure to tune in to that Ole Miss LSU matchup this weekend at 6:30 p.m. in Baton Rouge. It'll be on the ABC network if you have to watch it from home. Like Zach said, I'll be in the stands. I'll be with my father, who's an LSU fan, and a couple of buddies of mine. So we'll be in enemy territory down there, but it should be a good time. Haven't been to Baton Rouge in a while, so it should be a fun little time in my senior year of college. So it should be Should be a good weekend. I believe that's all we got for you guys, though. So make sure to tune in to the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.